Okay, fine. So we'll continue with the CSS selectors today and try to see it completely. Okay. So again, I request you guys to open this particular site so that you guys can try it out parallelly as and when I tell you. Okay. So if you see the items which we covered yesterday, so we have covered all these HTML tags. What is a HTML? What is a body? What is a div? Anchor tag, UL table, etc. And we have seen what is an attribute, what is a inbuilt attribute, what is a user-defined attribute. Now I'm yet to show you guys how the user-defined attribute can be helpful. That we will see today. Okay. So in the inbuilt attributes, we have seen what is a name, what is a type, what is a class, what is an ID. We will cover the rest of the items today, as and when you see the CSS selectors. Fine. And then I'll also show you the events part in the jQuery. Okay. So to start with, let me just quickly place some HTML content. We have a div. I give an ID. Class. Now, just to show you guys what we covered yesterday, so I can select an individual item using an ID. So when I type hash, which essentially means I'm trying to select this particular element which has an ID of para. So hash para will give a will select this particular paragraph. Okay, and we will use the color, and the same way we have the text box, ID text box. So whatever you type will start coming up in the red color. Okay. Now I can actually so I have used the class over here. Okay, and I've given the same class name to two elements in our page. Essentially means I'm trying to group these two elements. So when I want to apply select this group, I have to select using the class. I can select using the class. So how do I select using the class? When I press dot and specify the name, this is nothing but a class. It points to a class which has the value as odd. Fine. Okay. Now let's go ahead and add a custom attribute. Mm. So now what I'll do is I'll actually add an attribute called as let's say we give this um, give element tag as a name. Okay, and now how do we select a attribute? So it doesn't really matter it's a custom attribute or a inbuilt attribute. You can always select an attribute like this. Okay, so you in the square brackets you specify this particular part. So there are two ways again. So you can just specify the element tag. So all the elements which has this attribute will actually have this particular CSS. Okay, so if you see here, I have given a custom tag to two elements, but I have actually given different values. Okay, so where is the background yellow for even? This is the even part. It doesn't have a yellow background, right? So this is odd and this is odd, and this is even. This is the even part. Where do we have yellow background? This is not yellow. Okay, is it clear? You still have a doubt, Divya? The input box is odd class here. So this is the class attribute and it has a value odd. Element tag. See, this is a element. Input is an element. So this is the fundamental uh, parts of an HTML. So this is how you actually construct an HTML. So div, paragraph, input, these are all HTML tags. Okay, HTML elements as such. So each one of them are having its own properties. Now attributes, a class is an attribute for any given element. Okay, and we use class because if you want to specify additional properties for that. So when you actually develop a web element, probably you would want to group all these things using a particular flag kind of thing. So the class is something which actually helps you to do that. So when you specify class, the values for them can be repeated. Whereas when you specify ID, you should make sure that its ID is unique. So these are all the attributes are used because we want to apply some additional properties for things we are building here. That is the reason why we have all these things. So attributes are basically for additional properties. To apply any additional properties to the elements, we use attributes. And class is one of the inbuilt attribute. Did I answer your question, Varsha? Element tag is a user defined. It's a user defined tag, so you can specify anything. It doesn't really matter as such. But what we are trying to see here is there are two kinds of tags. One is the inbuilt tag and the user defined tag. User defined tags we specify for our own purpose. There is no additional need, but if you want to store any data, or the web developers, when you actually create a huge application, so there exists something called as a user defined tags, which can be used for selecting. And how do you select those things is what we are trying to see. It is for references and tagging, that's all. And element underscore tag is nothing inbuilt. You can type anything. You can type Venki or you can type Varsha, it doesn't really matter. Okay, it is a user defined tag. You can have your own input key and input value, key and a value, it's up to you, but it will be come to use when you actually want to do something with those tags. That's all. Whenever you want to do something with those tags, probably you want to store some data for on the click event or something, it will be useful, that's all. But there is a provision for user defined tags, that is all. Okay. Okay, as you see, I have specified the same user tag over here and here. Now I can either select just by the key. So when I specify a square bracket and some text inside that, which essentially means it is searching for elements which has this particular tag, this particular value as a key. Okay, so if you see here, element tag is the value, so it actually searches for all the elements which has an attribute name called as element underscore tag, and whatever style you apply will be applied for both of them. Now I can go ahead and then actually specify the exact div I want by specifying the value also. So I can select a particular element using a key of an attribute, or I can select using both key and the value. Right, now if I do it, it will be applied only for the text box. If you see here, this is not bold, only this one will be bold. So these are the different ways. What I am trying to show you is the different ways of selecting an element in HTML. And this different ways is using the CSS selector. So all these varieties which you see, hash and a value, dot and a value, square brackets and a key, square brackets key equal to value. All these are different ways of selecting elements in a HTML. Okay, so if I specify only element underscore tag, so the I am selecting using a attribute key, which at that particular time these two will be selected. Okay, so both these elements will be selected and made a bold. Okay, you see this is bold, but the moment I specify a value, so it actually checks for the elements which has the both key and the value as this one, and in this case it selects only the input value. Okay, so you can actually see here this particular tag, this particular div content will lose its boldness and only the text box will contain the bold keys. Okay, fine. Okay. Now the next thing is, so right now we have seen that how can you identify a particular element in HTML straight away. So there is no hierarchy or a pattern which we used. So it's a straightforward selection. So you have an ID, you have a class, you have an attribute and a value. You just put it and then you use it. You identify it. Now, what if you don't have in HTML which you are trying to work on? So a particular element which you want doesn't contain any special attributes like a class or an ID or an attribute. It doesn't contain anything. For example, this particular P. So I create a paragraph inside this div. Now, okay, this particular thing doesn't really have any attributes or anything except the tag. Now, one way is I can just specify P. I can just say P and put the CSS, which will actually select all the paragraphs in the page. But if I want to select this particular P alone, how would I do that? That is the problem statement. Okay, so in this case, what you can do is, so you can actually figure out the pattern in which the particular element exists. Okay, so there is something called as hierarchy. So you can actually see that we have a div element, and inside the div element we have a paragraph. Okay, so this has a particular hierarchy. This is a parent and this is a child. So what I can do is I can say id hash div. When I give space, which essentially means all the items which are inside P, okay, should be bold. So which will actually highlight only the this particular P. You guys got this? Okay. So what we are trying to do, what we have seen so far is a direct selection of a element. Okay. So hash para is like, it essentially means you have a div with a value para. So select that and apply the styling. You have a ID, element with ID text box. Select that and apply the styling. Now, what if there is an element? Okay. What if there is an element which does not have any attributes for selection except the element as such? Okay, in that case how would you actually go and select that particular element? That is the problem statement. Okay, in this case what you do is you actually check for a pattern in the web page. In our case the pattern is you have a parent div and the child is the paragraph which we are looking for, and the parent div has a id called div. Okay, so what I do is I specify hash div, which means I'm selecting this particular div, and I say space p. When I say space p, which means this particular selection means for an element which is having an id div and for its children p, means for all the children's paragraph, for all the children paragraph apply this styling. That is what has happened for all these div children's which has a element p. You can apply the paragraph, you can apply this styling. Clear? Basically if you give selector 1 space selector 2, which essentially means the second one is a child of first one. This is the selector 1 and this is the selector 2. So this means p is a child of this particular div element with id div, and the styling will go and apply only for those items. Okay, this is one way of representing parent child relationship in a css selector. Still not clear? Yeah, it will not be selected because it is not a child of element with a div ID div. So if you specify only P, if you specify only paragraph, which essentially means apply this particular styling for all the elements which tag is paragraph P. Okay, in that case, all the paragraphs will be having this styling font bold. But I want, my use case is I want to highlight only the paragraphs which are inside this particular div element, for which I will actually say this is my div ID space P, which means for all its children P, apply the styling. Okay, so only for the elements which are inside the div will be applied the styling. Okay, this is one. Now the second way is choosing the particular child. Okay, so there is another selector. Okay, so when I say, so if you see here, I have the same div element. I have three paragraphs, 1, 2 and 3. Right, so if there are multiple divs, so either you need to search if for any attributes in that particular div. Okay, for example, in this div I have this ID, so I choose this ID and then I traverse further. I take this as my positioning, and from there I actually traverse further. So I say hash div and then I say P, or I say P nth child 2. Got it? So it doesn't really matter this particular moment you specify the attribute value hash div. So it doesn't really matter if it's a div or it's a span or something. Just hold on for a minute. Just a minute. Hey, sorry guys. Sorry for the interruption. So I was telling, so if you have multiple divs, what you need to search for is, do you have a particular pattern? Do you have any attribute? So you need to search for references as such. Okay. In this case, I have the reference of ID. So I use that ID and then I select this particular div. Did I answer your question, Pranish? Or you still have a doubt? So your question is, so you have multiple divs, right? Okay. So this is div one. Okay. So your question is, let me just be clear with your question. So you have multiple divs, and each div is having a paragraph inside it, right? Now you are asking, how can you select a particular paragraph in a particular div? Am I right? That's your question, correct? Okay. So let's go ahead and create two divs. Okay. So that is one div. This is another div. Okay, inside this I make another paragraph. Okay, so this is the another division, and this is a para inside another division. Okay, now if you see, there are two divs, but what I did is I say I want to actually highlight this particular para alone. Okay, so what I do is I see this div and there are two divs, but then this particular div has an ID called div. So we'll actually rename this. We'll rename it to um, first division. Probably you are getting confused with the div and the ID. Okay, so whatever value is here is what it should go here. Now since I have a reference of ID for this div, okay, I actually use this ID and I say that I want, okay, I'll select this particular paragraph and I say it's children's P. Inside among the children's P, select the second child and highlight that. Okay, so only this will be highlighted. Now if I want to highlight the first child, so you don't really have to specify child number, you can specify that. Okay, right. So ideally there's no need to specify, but that's okay. So I selected this particular divs. Among the two divs, I selected this particular div using an ID, and inside this div I selected the first P. Okay, now if I want to select another div, now there are multiple ways. If you don't have any attribute for this div, what you can do is you can say again, so div, or say everything is inside a body, so you have a div and say nth child of 2. Let's see. This is the second div. Right. Okay. See. So I have used another pattern. Okay. So there are multiple ways of coming to a particular div. So since this particular div does not have any attribute, what I did is I actually checked for the count of it, position of that particular div. Okay, and use that particular div as the selector nth child of 3, and then selected this particular div, and inside the div I am actually searching for the paragraph. So since there is only one paragraph, I don't really have to specify anything, so even a normal P will work. Now assume this particular div has a class. Okay, so what I can do, I can actually, instead of doing all this, I'll just say dot class name. Okay, and I say apply. It still applies. Okay, it is all about what can you see, what can you identify a particular tag as a uniqueness, and you can use that particular uniqueness to select that particular item. If you are not able to find that particular element, any uniqueness in the particular element, for example in this case I'm not able to find anything unique in this P alone, so what I do, I actually search for a pattern. So what does it parent is a div. Okay, so actually see how I can actually identify this div. If not this div, how can its parent? Okay, so that I can always traverse. So moment I give space something and, okay, space something, which essentially means child child child, so it goes in a hierarchical manner. and I can form that pattern. Did I answer your question, Pranish? Or should we do it once more? Anybody else? Any questions? Okay. So what we have seen is, what does a space in a selector do? Space basically means child of. When I give selector 1 space selector 2, which essentially means selector 2 is a child of selector 1. In this case, P is a child of a class with a value div class. That is what it means. Okay. Now, the other way of another scenario, what we can actually see is, let's say inside a P, I have a label. Okay, let me take this. So inside a paragraph, I have another paragraph. Okay, now okay, this is not a good example. How can I explain you? So what we are trying to see is a immediate child. So this particular div. Let's take a scan. Oh, there is no P. So all the content is right. So this will be a good example. Okay, fine. So if you see here, what I have written is, we have a div. Let me just maintain the hierarchy so that it is easy for you guys to read. Okay, so if you see, we have the div. Inside the div, we have a just text. We have a paragraph, and we have a span inside a paragraph, and we have a span outside the paragraph. Okay. Now, when I say div class, which essentially means it is pointing this particular element. Okay, and space span, which means for all the childrens which are inside the div, this div class, and which has a tag name as span. For all these items, we need to actually apply it should apply the styling. Okay, so that is what we have written here. Now if I want to apply it for only immediate children, so we have something called as hierarchy, correct? So we can have children inside children inside children, so there is no end for this hierarchy, so we can go to any number of hierarchies. Now when you want to actually apply it for a immediate children, so what you do is you use this less less than symbol, I don't know, greater than less than symbol. Okay, so in this case, which essentially means it applies only for its immediate children, not for all the children in any level, but the children for the next level. Only for the first level of span, this particular thing will be applied. Okay, confused or clear? Guys, you guys understood the difference between a space and the greater than symbol? No doubts? Okay, fine. So what I'm going to do is, before we go to the next topic, I'm going to show you guys. Okay, so let's open. Yeah, so that will also work. So which essentially means there is a element with the class name div class, and you are actually searching for a paragraph in the next level. So inside these classes, you are searching for a paragraph, and inside that immediate child of span, you would like to apply the styling. So when I do this, this particular thing alone will get highlighted. Clear? It'll work. Fine. So what I'm going to do is, so I'm going to use this inspector. So let's just test our understanding. Okay. So assume I want to select this particular item. How would I select this particular anchor tag? Any answers? How would I select this particular anchor tag? What will be my CSS selector? Anyone? Any attempts? You guys are able to see my screen, right? Yeah. So why don't you just give a try of how can you actually identify this particular anchor tag? Now I want to change the color of this particular anchor tag as blue. How will I do that? What will be my selector? Okay, so hash personal loan, you will be able to select the anchor tag or you will select the LI. I want to select the anchor tag. So what would be my CSS selector? Anybody? Dot personal space loan. No. See, the personal loan is a text. It's not a class. Okay, right. So we have one answer. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Yeah. Dot href will not work because href is an attribute. It's not a class name. So dot is used only for the values which belongs to a class attribute, not anything else. So if there is an attribute called class and it has a value href, only then the dot href will work. In this case, we don't have anything like that. Okay. Anyways, we'll see that later. I'll show it in the update. Fine. So we have two answers and they are correct. So we can use, what is that? So we can select this particular LI using personal hyphen loan ID. So it will be hash personal hyphen loan. It will be hyphen loan but not space loan. Okay. Nimisha. So it's hyphen. And either space anchor tag or greater than symbol A. Okay. Now that is the answer. So these two are the answers. This is one answer, or this is another answer. So both the ways you will be able to select this particular element. Now let's say you want to select this particular uh, okay. So let's say you want to select for this particular home loan amount. How would you do that? So this is the HTML you have. How would you select that particular element? Any attempts? Hmm. Hash class. Okay. See, you cannot give a hash class because hash, which essentially means it's an attribute ID, and there is no ID with a class. Okay, so this is an ID attribute. So you have EMI calculator inner form. So you can say hash EMI calculator inner form. There is no hash class. Okay, and second thing, just to let you know, guys, if you have multiple classes, so okay, let's do this. So there is a provision. So an ID can have only one value. Okay, but a class can have multiple values. So I can actually say even odd in this. So I can have multiple values in a class, and I can represent by providing a space. So which essentially means this particular element has classes named even and odd. Okay, so this particular attribute class, which is a inbuilt attribute, okay, can contain multiple values. No other attribute can have multiple values unless and until it is a custom attribute. But this class can have multiple values, and you can specify multiple values with a space. And the value of this particular thing can be unlimited. So I can specify any number of values inside this, and all of them are valid. Now, how can I specify this particular? Let me remove the junk. Okay, now how can I specify these two items as a single selector? Okay, so how can I do is, I will say since it's a class and it has a value, how do we select a class? Using a dot. Okay, I say dot even. Okay, so this is one class value. Now how do you represent another class value? By dot odd. Since I have not given a space, if I give a space, which means that there is an element with a class name even, and apply this particular styling for all the childrens which are having a class called odd. That is the assumption. But since even and odd are there in the same class, you don't give a space. You just say even dot odd, dot even dot odd, which means there exists an element which has the class values as even and odd, even and odd. Is this clear? So is this clear? Dot even dot odd. Okay, so let's go back to this and try it once more. So this is the strong is the element. Okay, now how would I select this particular item? So we have somebody saying that you can select this particular class and then space children strong. But is this the only class? No. I have multiple classes. So this is one class and this is also having the same value. So there are multiple elements with the same value. So this might not really work. So if you choose only class value space strong, there might exist an element with the same pattern. Okay, so this is not the right answer. So any more attempts? You can use this one. You can use this, but point number one, this will work only for label. It will not select strong. And second thing, it will select all the elements which contains this particular class, these two classes. And in this page, there are multiple elements with the same class names. So that will not work. Okay. And Pranish, so you don't specify dot class. Okay. So L amount form group. So there is nothing like dot class hyphen quotes form hyphen group. So if at all it will be dot form group and dot L amount. And this is not the solution for what we are looking for. So this is a wrong way, Pranish, this is a wrong way of representing it. So the right way of representing would be like this. And this is not what we want. So we want to reach here, this value. How would you do that? And we have a, can we use for? Yeah, so for is again an attribute. So you can definitely use it. But how do you represent an attribute? Can you please type it out, Nimisha? So we have more options. Dot form group again, Varsha. So if you say dot form group space L amount, which essentially means you're searching for the element which contains L amount as a child. So the current way of representing would be dot form group dot L amount space 12 again dot control label. But again, it will reach only till this label. That might work, okay, but it will reach only this till this label. I want to reach here. How would I use that? How do I do that? All right, so correct. So we have one answer, Asutosh. uh, this is one way of representing. Yes, this will work. Any more answers? Do you see any other pattern in this particular HTML? So we have one answer. So this will work. But any other attempts, any other answers? So basically you have gone from this particular div, said select the child div with these classes and then child div with strong. So that is correct, but any other way? So yeah, so what I'm trying to ask you guys is, can you construct a selector using this particular attribute? The other way of representing would be like this. Yeah, so that will also work. Okay, so you guys are clear? So can you just try it out at your end, this particular part? So I'll give you just 2-3 minutes. So just try it out, all the permutation combinations in the JS fiddle, apply some styling, and let me know if you guys have any doubts. After this, we will be seeing how what can we do in a JavaScript. Okay, so 2 minutes. Let's just try it out. 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll move on to the next topic. Guys tried it? Trying? Not trying? No questions? What about others? Others? What is the status? You guys trying? Any doubts? Because next we're gonna move to the next JavaScript events as such. Okay, so let's continue with our next topic. So what we're going to see is what actually happens in a JavaScript. So we have seen two items in a web application. What is a HTML and what is a CSS. And we have seen the different CSS selectors. Now what we're going to see is we're going to see what happens in the third item. So the third item is this particular space, the JavaScript part. Now to start with this, I want everybody to click on this particular JavaScript item and include jQuery. You guys done this? So click on the JavaScript part and click over here framework and say jQuery. So this will basically include the jQuery library. You guys did that? Yes, no? 2.1.4. You have this JavaScript tag. You guys are able to see my screen? Can you see my pointer? Yeah, so click over here. You will get a pop-up and select jQuery 2.1.4 over here. Done? Okay, yeah. So we have the HTML tags, okay, and we have applied some stylings. Right, I'll tell you. So that is a library which we have included. So we are actually importing a library. So ideally, how would you import a library to a text file would be something like this. Right. So if I have to include a library, so I use a script tag. Hmm. So library is nothing but another JavaScript file. Only thing is the code is present in that particular different file. Okay. Now to include that particular file inside my HTML, I use a script tag. And in the script tag, I give the I use the attribute. I think it's href. I assume. Right. So I use the attribute src, which means the source. Okay. And I specify the path. In this case, it can be a file which is in that folder path, or it can be a direct URL. For example, I can search for jQuery library online. Right. So this is the jQuery. So I can do it this way also. So I can say script src and the path. So this is the overall path which is present in the lib. Is it taken off? See, this is a online URL for the same jQuery. So I can just take that and paste it here, which essentially means I'm including that particular JavaScript library, and I can use all the functions features which are present in that JavaScript into my HTML. Now, since if it's a file, this is actually how you do it. But since we are actually using a UI as our platform to code, so this particular UI provides us to include a library using this. So where you can use this particular feature provided by this website to include a library. Clear? Did I answer your question, Varsha? Okay. So now that we have this particular library, what we're going to do is there are something called as events in a JavaScript library, jQuery. Okay, so the event can be on hover, on click, on drag, etc. etc. Okay, now we are not really interested in multiple events. We are going to see how you can actually select again, how you can actually select an element and apply a event. Okay, so since I have included this Java jQuery library, I can call or use that particular library's functions using dollar. Okay, bracket. I specify uh, the selector now. Okay, so whatever selectors we have seen, it is exactly the same things. You can use these selectors. Okay, and say click, which means I'm binding this particular click event with this particular selector. Okay, and again, our idea is to see how this particular JavaScript works with these selectors. Now, no need to really focus on how exactly this function is written and this syntaxes. Okay, we are not going to use this particular things inside Selenium. It is only for us to understand how we can use the selectors as a click events or any event. That is the only thing. Okay, so once we have this, now I can just say, so in JavaScript, the print statement is like alert. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here is I have a click event and I'm trying to bind it to only the CSS selector with this pattern. So div class. So where is the div class? Here is a div class. Div class with the immediate child P, with the immediate child as span. So only if I click on this particular span, this particular click event has to trigger. Okay, so I've done it. So moment I click on this particular thing, I'll get the alert. If I click on any other places, I will not get this particular event. Okay, only if I click on this particular item, I'll get the alert. Clear? Or do you want me to repeat? Right. So what are we trying to observe here are two things. One, there is something called as events in a web application. For example, if you see here, this moment I click over here, that is a click event. So there exists a click event which is bound to this particular tab, and inside that click event, these actions are, so these are the set of actions are written over this. Okay, now this is a element. Now there is a drag event which is attached to this particular slider, and as a resultant there is a piece of logic which is returned to increment the value inside this. Okay. So there exists something called as events in a JavaScript. So that is what makes your web page live. Okay. So using these events is what makes your web page a web application, an interactive application. Okay. Now, how do you apply these particular events is nothing but this particular selectors. Okay, so I use dollar and say give the selector, and I have bound this particular event click to that particular selector. Now this particular selector leads me to this particular span. So this particular click events get triggered only once I click over this particular pattern, and this pattern is nothing but this. Only if I click over this particular span, this particular logic piece of logic should get executed. That is what we have done. So if you see here, only if I click on this, that alert appears. If I click on any other place, the alert doesn't appear. Okay, confused? I have to repeat once more. Okay, so how can I do this? Okay. Let's take with a sample one. Let's forget that. Okay, so what we have is a click event. So are you guys clear regarding the event click, or you have doubt in the click event? So you guys are clear. Okay, now only thing is, where exactly should we bind this particular click event? Okay, so if you see here, when I say dot click, I'm binding the click event. This is a syntax. Okay, so when I say dot click, I'm binding this particular click event to a particular element in the HTML. Now once the click event happens, what to do goes here. Okay, so I can write anything what I want over here, and that will get executed. Now right now I have put only alert. Okay, so it is just to show that the click has triggered. Okay, there is no other reason why I have written this piece of code. Only the reason I have written the piece of code is to make sure that the event has been triggered. Okay, so I have this piece of code executing on the click of something. Okay, now what is that something is which comes inside this? So if you see here, we have used the CSS selector to actually the color coding. So we have used this hash para, which essentially means there exists an element, it can be any element, which has an id, and the value of the id is para. Okay, the same way I am doing here. So I am selecting an element which has an ID. So see, it is hash, which means it is an ID, and the ID's value is para. Okay. Now for that para, I am actually binding this event click, and the moment I bind this event click, whatever I have written inside this event triggering will actually get executed. So in this case, I have changed it to para. So I click on para, the alert appears. I click anywhere else, the alert doesn't appear. So this code will not get executed for anything except the matched pattern which I given over here. Currently the pattern is hash para, which means there exists an ID which has a value para. Clear? Still doubts? Others? You can just unmute yourself and ask if you have any doubts, so that we'll be clear on which part of it you are actually confused. You want me to repeat once more? I can probably take another way and explain you guys, but If you could just unmute yourself and let me know where exactly you're confused, I can concentrate over there. No questions? Okay. Now, whatever CSS selectors pattern, okay. Can we use any function name? We can have given function. No, this is not a function name. This is a syntax, and the syntax has to go like this. So it is dot click. So you define the event type. Here the event type is a click. Okay. So you specify that click, and you say that this is my callback function. So this function is a syntax. You cannot change that. Okay. And you can, whatever inside is up to you again. Right? You can try it out. So what you can do is, this piece of code remains the same. Okay. Only thing you need to change is the CSS selector. Okay. So you can replace that particular the place where I have specified this particular selector. So this particular piece of code with any of the patterns which you have already written, and see if that event works for all of those. Can you just quickly try it out? You guys are trying? Just replace this particular code with any one of the selectors which we have over here, and try click and check. It should work. The alert will come only on the click of that particular element which you have specified over here. So you guys are clear? Okay, fine. Now we will see one more event. So we have seen the click event, right? Now for the input boxes as such, okay, input box or text area elements, there exists one more event called as change. Okay, so what I will do is, I will write, sorry, input. So this is my selector input, and say, so I will write the event in another way, or I'll say change function change. Okay, so what does this event do? So this event is, when I click on this, I type something and I hold back. So I activate it, I type something. So basically, whenever I make a change in the text box, this particular event will get triggered. Clear? You guys got this? So change is another event which exists in the web application. So there might be, for example, if you see, now if I change the values inside this text box, there is an event written to auto adjust this particular slider according to the value which is specified in the text box. So if I change this to 50,000, the value gets changed accordingly. So this is possible because of the change event which is written over the text box. Now, the reason why we are actually looking at this is when you write the Selenium automation. So this is one of the features of this page, right? So you need to test if this feature works or not. And how do you test it? By identifying the event and seeing if the value changes accordingly or not. So that is where all these particular events. So you need to know what are the different kinds of events exist in a page, and when you write an automation, you will be needed to test all the features working properly or not. Okay, clear with this, or you want me to repeat? Yeah, and this particular change event cannot be basically, it can be applied other places, but ideally a user is not allowed to change anything apart from a text box. So text box is a place where user can interact. So the change event is generally written over the input elements. Okay, it can be a checkbox, it can be a radio button or anything. So you can apply the change event and it gets triggered. Fine. You can try that out. Now, what we're going to see here is once, so this is something called as a callback function. Callback function means when an event has occurred, now the framework actually, when you bind something to that event, it gives you a provision for applying a piece of logic to do some action. In this case, I'm binding the click event or binding the change event to the input tag, any input tag in the HTML. Now the framework gives me a provision to apply some logic at a particular point. So that logic application is nothing but this callback function. So whatever I write inside this callback function will be executed. Okay. So the other importance of having this callback function is you can identify specifically what has been clicked. Okay, or you can actually go and figure out what is the value which the event has been triggered for. So I will show you how it is. So instead of hard coding just change, what I will do is I will say e dot target dot value. See, whatever I type will appear. Okay, now the reason being is, you guys understood this or no? So let me just make it once more clear. So in this case, I am having two text boxes. Okay, so text box 1 and text box 2. Fine. Now, since I have returned the event, just over the selected pattern is just input, which essentially means this particular event will execute on any of the inputs. So if I type this, it will get executed. If I change the value in this, it will get executed. But when the alert happens, now when you are writing in a programmatic way, you need to figure out a way of which particular item has been clicked. If it's a generic, this is a generic event selector. Okay, this is a generic input selector. Now, among since it's a generic one, since there are multiple of them, I need to figure out how can I actually uh, tell that this is the particular input tag which is being executed. Okay, how do I do that? I can do it by capturing this particular element, and I can read the attribute values which are present in that particular. I can need the value in that element, or I can actually get the attribute values in that particular element. Okay, so I can say again, so when you're using Selenium, the syntax will vary. So don't focus on the syntax. Check the only thing I want you guys to see is the possibilities in a web application. So I can actually read the element. So this is a custom tag which I have given. So I can specify this custom tag, okay, and I can actually get the value of it and figure out that this is the particular element which I have used, which the operation has happened. Okay, so it's person name. So this is the tag. So I know this is the value with the person name. So I know this is the particular value which has been changed. So if I type in the second one, it will be person name one. Okay, so what else? So how does this actually be useful? Let me just show you guys. So I'm selecting this div, and I'm putting some text inside that div. Don't try understanding the syntax really doesn't matter, it's only the concept. Okay, so there is actually a visible div which has no content as such, or I say, okay, so this is the div which I have entered over here. Now I say box 1. So on the change, I will know changed by this particular person name. Okay, so let me space. See, changed by person name, this particular text box. And the changed value is box. Okay, changed by person 1. This is a text box. Changed value is box 2. Clear? So this is the another usage of the you know custom attributes, where you can put your own attributes which is as per the application and its own values, and you can use those attributes for your own usage of the application logic. Okay, in this case I have used it to just print it in the div to know which particular uh, text box has undergone change and what is the value is being changed to. Clear? Any doubts or lost? Hello? No doubts? So we clear? Yeah, I will send the code. You can try it out yourself. So this is it. So these are the different items of basics of HTML you guys need to know. Okay. So I recommend you guys just practice by applying different selectors and see if you are able to select that particular div. So you can actually create your own HTML, apply multiple combinations, multiple hierarchies, okay, and see if you are able to reach to that particular element. You are able to write an event, you are able to apply a style, and all using the selectors, CSS selectors. Okay, tomorrow we will see about another. What we are seeing so far is the basics of HTML and CSS selector and a few events. Tomorrow we will see about the X part, and we will start with the Selenium coding. Okay, and I will send you guys post meeting of in half an hour or something. I will send you guys the each of you the machine details, so that you can just log in and you guys can practice over there. Anyways, for till today you can use this JS fiddle. This is good enough for you guys to practice. So from tomorrow you will need Eclipse, for which you will have the your environments ready. Okay. So please practice, and please do come back with doubts and more clarity. Okay. So this is the HTML part. This is the CSS part. So you guys have everything. Fine. Okay. Thanks, guys.